The knife sliced through the overpriced steak with surgical precision, each cut deliberate and measured, just like everything else in my life had become since marrying Elin Rydell 3 years ago. Calculated, controlled, temporary. I'm Cole Merrick, 35 years old, and I design buildings for a living. Architectural project manager at Henderson and Associates, if you want the fancy title. I make good money, not great, but solid middle-class income that keeps us comfortable in our Manhattan apartment, or kept us comfortable anyway. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Tonight was Elin's 33rd birthday, and she'd insisted on Meridian, the kind of restaurant where appetizers cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. The dining room buzzed with the particular energy of New York's aspiring elite, event planners, marketing executives, trust fund kids playing entrepreneur. Elin's crowd. Cole, you remember my business partner Tasha, right? Elin's voice carried that practiced sweetness she used when networking. And this is Richard Blackwell from Blackwell Ventures. I stood to shake hands with a man whose watch probably cost more than my car. Richard had the kind of confident smile that came from never having to check his bank balance before making a purchase. Pleasure to meet you, Richard said, his grip firm but dismissive. Elin tells me you're in construction? Architecture, I corrected, settling back into my chair. I manage large-scale commercial projects. How interesting. The way he said it suggested it was anything but. And you two met through work? Elin laughed, that tinkling sound she'd perfected for social occasions. Oh no, nothing like that. We met at a coffee shop near my old office. Cole was reading some technical manual, looking very serious and scholarly. The table chuckled politely. I forced a smile and took another bite of my steak, which tasted like expensive cardboard. Cole's very practical, Elin continued, her hand finding mine across the table. Her engagement ring caught the candlelight, the ring I'd saved 6 months to afford. He keeps me grounded when my head gets too far in the clouds with all my grand event planning schemes. More polite laughter. I squeezed her hand gently, playing my part in whatever performance this was. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Tasha dominated most of it, regaling the table with stories about their latest corporate event, a product launch for some tech startup that had apparently been absolutely revolutionary in its execution. Elin beamed as Tasha described her role in coordinating everything from the venue selection to the custom cocktail menu. Elin has such vision, Richard said, raising his wine glass. It's rare to find someone who can see the big picture and execute on the details. That's exactly what I keep telling her, added James Morrison, another venture capitalist who joined us for dinner. She's wasted working for other people. She should be running her own firm. Elin's eyes lit up. Actually, Tasha and I have been talking about that. We're considering starting our own event management company. This was news to me. I set down my fork and looked at her. Really? You hadn't mentioned that. It's still very preliminary, she said quickly. Just some initial conversations about what it might look like. The market's definitely there, James said. High-end corporate events, luxury weddings, product launches. There's serious money to be made if you know what you're doing. And Elin definitely knows what she's doing, Tasha added. She's been the driving force behind our biggest successes at Morrison events. I nodded along, trying to process this information. Starting a business was a big decision, one that would affect both of us. The fact that she hadn't even mentioned it stung more than I wanted to admit. Of course, it would require significant startup capital, Richard said. Office space, equipment, initial marketing, staff. You'd probably need a substantial financial cushion to weather the first year or two. That's always the challenge, Elin agreed. Finding the right backing for the vision. The conversation continued, but I found myself increasingly disconnected from it. These people spoke about money the way I talked about blueprints, casually, assuming everyone understood the technical details. But there was an undercurrent I was picking up on, a sense that I was being evaluated somehow. When the server came around with dessert menus, Elin waved them away. Actually, I think we should do a toast first. It is my birthday, after all. Everyone raised their glasses as she stood, her blonde hair catching the restaurant's warm lighting. She looked beautiful. She always did. That had never been our problem. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began. It means so much to have my favorite people around me as I start another year. This has been such an incredible time in my life, full of new opportunities and exciting possibilities. She paused, her gaze moving around the table before landing on me. Something flickered in her expression, a moment of hesitation that made my stomach clench. I've been thinking a lot lately about permanence versus flexibility, she continued, about the difference between settling and staying open to what the universe might have in store for us. The table was quiet now, hanging on her words. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. Take Cole, for example. She gestured toward me with her wine glass. He's wonderful, really. Stable, reliable, practical. But don't read too much into it. He's temporary. The words hit me like a physical blow. The table erupted in surprised laughter, the kind that comes when someone says something shocking but apparently hilarious. Richard nearly choked on his wine. Tasha covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with delight. "Elin," James said through his laughter, "you can't just say things like that." "What? I'm being honest." She was laughing too now, caught up in the moment. "I mean, look at him. Sweet, dependable Cole with his blueprints and his sensible shoes. He's perfect for right now, but let's be realistic about what this is." More laughter. Someone, I think it was Richard, actually applauded. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of dealing with difficult clients and demanding bosses had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure. "I'm kidding, obviously," Elin said, finally seeming to notice my silence. But her tone suggested she wasn't kidding at all. "Cole knows I love him, right, honey?" All eyes turned to me. The laughter faded, but the energy at the table remained electric. They were waiting for my response, probably expecting me to laugh it off or make some self-deprecating joke about being the stable, boring husband. Instead, I reached for my wallet. I pulled out 320s and placed them next to my plate, enough to cover my meal, tip, and a bit extra. The action was deliberate, methodical. No one was laughing anymore. "You're absolutely right, Elin," I said, standing slowly. My voice was calm, level. Temporary just ended. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair and walked away from the table without looking back. Behind me, I heard Elin call my name, her voice sharp with surprise, but I didn't stop. The maitre d' nodded politely as I passed, probably assuming I was stepping out for a phone call. The October air hit me like a slap as I emerged onto the sidewalk. Manhattan buzzed around me, cars honking, people laughing, the city living its indifferent life while mine fell apart in a restaurant I couldn't afford. I started walking north, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, my mind strangely clear despite everything. My phone started buzzing before I'd made it 2 blocks. I walked for 43 minutes before my phone finally stopped ringing. The display showed 17 missed calls from Elin, 6 from Tasha, and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably people from the dinner who'd somehow gotten my contact information. I didn't answer any of them. Our apartment was in Midtown East, a 1-bedroom we'd stretched our budget to afford because Elin insisted location mattered for her career. The doorman nodded as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. I wondered if he'd seen enough domestic drama to recognize the signs. The apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, like I was seeing it for the first time. The expensive furniture Elin had insisted we needed, the art prints she'd chosen because they were investment pieces, the kitchen gadgets we'd never used but looked impressive when she entertained clients. All of it suddenly felt like props in someone else's life. I poured myself 3 fingers of the bourbon Elin's father had given us for Christmas, Pappy Van Winkle, the kind of whiskey that cost more per bottle than I used to spend on food in a month. Tonight seemed like an appropriate occasion to break it open. The first sip burned, but the second went down smooth. I sat on our leather couch, her leather couch really, since I'd wanted something more practical, and tried to process what had just happened. 3 years of marriage, 4 years together, total. Had she always seen me as temporary? I thought back through our relationship, looking for signs I might have missed. The way she introduced me at parties, her reluctance to combine our finances completely, the separate social media accounts, the girls' trips I wasn't invited to, the business dinners where spouses weren't included. Maybe I'd been willfully blind. Maybe I'd wanted the stability so badly that I'd ignored the warning signs. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Cole, please come back. I was drunk and stupid. We need to talk." E. Then another? "Everyone left. I'm sorry. Please." And another? "I'm outside. Can you buzz me up?" I walked to the window and looked down at the street. Sure enough, there was Elin on the sidewalk, still in her birthday dress, looking up at our building. Even from 12 floors up, I could see she was crying. My phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message. "Cole, please. I know you're up there. I can see the lights on. I was horrible tonight, and I'm sorry. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Please, can we just talk? I'm getting soaked out here." It was raining. I hadn't noticed when it started, but now I could see the drops streaking down the window. Part of me, the part that had loved her enough to marry her, Wanted to go downstairs and bring her up, the part that still remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place. But a bigger part of me, the part that had felt the room's laughter like a physical assault, stayed exactly where I was. I poured another bourbon and sat back down. My phone continued to buzz with increasingly desperate messages, but I didn't read them. Instead, I started thinking about practical things. Logistics, the kind of problem-solving that had made me good at my job. We had a joint checking account and separate savings accounts. The apartment lease was in both our names, but I'd been the one making most of the rent payments since Elin's income was inconsistent. My name was on the utilities, the internet, the insurance policies. More importantly, I was listed as the guarantor on several of Elin's business contracts. When she'd started freelancing 2 years ago, she'd needed someone with steady income and good credit to co-sign for equipment leases and venue deposits. I'd been happy to help, seeing it as an investment in our shared future. Now I was seeing it differently. I opened my laptop and logged into our bank accounts. The joint checking had about $3,000 in it, money we'd been saving for a vacation to Italy that apparently wasn't going to happen. I transferred my half to my personal account, leaving her half untouched. Fair was fair. Then I opened my email and started composing messages. The first was to Peterson Equipment Rental, where I was guarantor on a lease for sound equipment Elin used for events. I gave them formal notice that I was withdrawing my guarantee, effective immediately. The lease terms required 30 days' notice for any changes to guarantor status. The second was to Meridian Catering, where I'd co-signed for a credit line Elin used for client events. Same message, same 30-day notice period. The third was to Urban Event Spaces, where my signature guaranteed payment for venue rentals. I sent similar messages to 6 other vendors, carefully reviewing each contract to ensure I was following proper procedures. I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I was just protecting myself from financial liability for business ventures I apparently wasn't going to be part of long term. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My phone had finally stopped buzzing. I looked out the window and saw that Elin was gone, probably having given up and gone to Tasha's apartment or her parents' place on the Upper East Side. I felt strangely calm. Not happy exactly, but clear-headed in a way I hadn't been in months, maybe years. The bourbon was making me philosophical. I thought about the buildings I designed, how every structure needed a solid foundation, how you couldn't build something permanent on temporary supports, how sometimes the kindest thing you could do was tear down a structure before it collapsed and hurt someone. I finished my drink and went to bed. For the first time in years, I had the whole mattress to myself. I woke up at 6:30, my usual time, with the kind of clarity that comes after making a difficult decision. No hangover despite the bourbon, no regret about the night before. Just a strange sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Elin still wasn't home. Her side of the bed was untouched, her phone charger still plugged in next to her nightstand. I showered, made coffee, and got ready for work like it was any other Wednesday morning. My phone had accumulated more messages overnight, but I deleted them without reading them. Whatever Elin wanted to say could wait until I'd had time to think. Henderson and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown. I'd been there for 8 years, working my way up from junior architect to project manager. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly commercial buildings, office complexes, the occasional hotel, but it was steady, and I was good at it. "You look like hell," said Janet Morrison, our office manager, when I walked in. "Late night?" Something like that. I poured myself coffee from the break room machine and headed to my desk. I had a full day of meetings scheduled, a client presentation at 10, a site visit at 2, a budget review at 4, normal, productive work that required focus and attention to detail. Exactly what I needed to keep my mind occupied. The client presentation went well. We were proposing a mixed-use development in Brooklyn, residential units over retail space, the kind of project that would take 2 years to complete and provide steady work for our entire team. I walked them through the architectural plans, explained the engineering challenges, answered their questions about timelines and costs. "Excellent work, Cole," said Mr. Henderson afterward. "I think we've got this one locked up." It felt good to be competent at something, to have people trust my judgment and expertise, to be valued for what I could actually do rather than dismissed as temporary. My phone buzzed during lunch. This time it wasn't Elin. It was my friend Mike Sullivan, whom I'd known since college. "Dude, what the hell happened last night?" he said when I answered. "Tasha's been calling everyone, saying you walked out on Elin at her birthday dinner." I should have expected this. Tasha and Mike's wife Jennifer were friends, which meant the story was already spreading through our social circle, probably getting embellished with each retelling. "It's complicated," I said. "Jennifer says Elin's devastated. that you just left without explanation. That's not exactly how it happened. So what did happen? Tasha made it sound like you had some kind of breakdown. I could hear the concern in Mike's voice, but also something else, a distance that hadn't been there before, like he was already choosing sides. Elin publicly humiliated me in front of a table full of people, I said. Called me temporary. Everyone laughed, so I left. There was a pause. Come on, man. She was probably just joking around. You know how she gets when she's been drinking. It wasn't a joke, Mike. Look, I don't know all the details, but Jennifer thinks you should apologize. Elin's really upset, and I hung up. The afternoon site visit was to a construction project in Queens, a 40-story residential tower that was 6 months behind schedule and 20% over budget. The kind of disaster that happened when people didn't pay attention to details, when temporary solutions became permanent problems. I spent 3 hours walking through the building with the contractor, identifying issues that needed to be addressed before the city would sign off on occupancy permits. Electrical work that wasn't up to code, plumbing that had been installed incorrectly, fire safety systems that wouldn't pass inspection. How long to fix all this? I asked. The contractor, a weathered man named Tony Ricci, shook his head. 2 months minimum, maybe 3, and that's if we can get the right permits and the materials show up on time. What's the holdup been? Honestly, the original plans were shit. Whoever designed this thing didn't think through the practical stuff. Looks pretty on paper, but try actually building it and everything goes sideways. I thought about that on the subway ride back to Manhattan. Pretty on paper, but impossible to build. Like a marriage based on surface attraction without solid foundations. Back at the office, I had 17 missed calls. This time, they weren't all from Elin. Several were from vendors whose contracts I'd terminated my guarantee on. Word was getting around. I called Peterson Equipment Rental first. Mr. Merrick, we got your email about withdrawing your guarantee, said the account manager. I have to tell you, this puts us in a difficult position. Ms. Rydell has an event this Saturday that requires the equipment she's already reserved. I understand, but I followed the proper procedures. 30 days notice, as specified in the contract. Yes, but, well, frankly, Ms. Rydell doesn't qualify for the credit line on her own. Her income history isn't sufficient for our requirements. That's between you and her. Mr. Merrick, is there some way we can work this out? Maybe a modified guarantee, or... No, I'm sorry, but no. I had similar conversations with 4 other vendors. The story was always the same. Without my financial backing, Elin didn't qualify for the credit and payment terms she'd been using to run her freelance business. By the time I got home, I understood exactly what I'd done. I'd pulled the financial foundation out from under Elin's career, not maliciously, not illegally, but systematically and completely. The apartment was still empty. I made myself dinner, pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy, and sat down to eat in silence. No music, no television, just the sound of traffic from the street below. My phone rang at 8:30. This time it was Elin's mother, Patricia Rydell. Cole, dear, I just spoke with Elin. She's beside herself about whatever happened last night. Patricia had never liked me much, though she'd been polite about it. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right connections, didn't move in the right social circles. But I'd always been respectful to her, and she'd tolerated me as a phase her daughter was going through. I'm sure she told you her version, I said. She said there was some kind of misunderstanding at dinner, that you left without explanation. That's not what happened. Well, regardless of what happened, don't you think you're being a bit dramatic? Walking away from your marriage over one argument? I almost laughed. Patricia, your daughter stood up in front of a table full of people and announced that I was temporary, that she was keeping her options open. Everyone laughed. There was a long pause. I'm sure she didn't mean it that way. I'm sure she did. Cole, you have to understand, Elin is at a critical point in her career. She's trying to establish herself, build her reputation. Sometimes that requires flexibility in how she presents herself. Flexibility. She needs to appear available for the right opportunities. You must understand that. I did understand, finally. This wasn't about one bad night, or too much wine, or a joke that went wrong. This was about Elin positioning herself for whatever came next, and I was an obstacle to that positioning. I understand perfectly, I said. Give Elin my best. I hung up and poured myself another bourbon. Outside, the city glittered like a circuit board. Millions of lights representing millions of lives. Most of them probably more honest than mine had been. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start looking for a new apartment. Friday afternoon, Mike Sullivan showed up at my office unannounced. I was reviewing structural plans for a hotel project when Janet knocked on my door. "You've got a visitor," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "Says he's a friend." Mike looked uncomfortable in his expensive suit, like he'd rather be anywhere else. He worked in finance for a hedge fund, made 3 times what I did, and usually carried himself with the confidence that money brings. Today he seemed nervous. "We need to talk," he said, closing my office door behind him. "I'm working, Mike. This will just take a minute." He sat down across from my desk without being invited. "Look, I know you're going through a rough patch with Elin, but you're putting people in an awkward position." I set down my pencil and looked at him. "How's that?" "Jennifer's been getting calls all week, from Tasha, from Elin's other friends. Everyone wants to know what really happened, and frankly, the story keeps changing." "What story are they telling now?" Mike shifted in his chair. "That you had some kind of breakdown at dinner, that you've been under a lot of stress at work, and maybe, I don't know, that you're not thinking clearly." "Interesting interpretation. Cole, I've known you for 15 years. You're the most level-headed guy I know. This isn't like you." "What isn't like me? Standing up for myself? Walking away from your marriage without even trying to work things out? Elin says you won't return her calls, won't talk to her. That's not the Cole I know." I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me something, Mike. In 15 years of friendship, have I ever lied to you? Ever exaggerated a story or made myself look better than I was?" "No, but..." "So when I tell you that Elin stood up at her birthday dinner and announced to a table full of people that I was temporary, that she was keeping her options open, and that everyone laughed, you think I'm lying?" Mike was quiet for a moment. "Maybe she was just joking around. You know how she is at parties." "Right. That's how she is." I picked up my pencil again. "Thanks for stopping by, Mike." "Don't be like that. I'm trying to help here." "No, you're not. You're trying to smooth things over so your wife stops getting uncomfortable phone calls from her friends. There's a difference." Mike's expression hardened. "You know what? Maybe Elin was right about you. Maybe you are just a phase she needed to go through." The words hung in the air between us. I felt something shift, like a gear clicking into place. "Get out of my office," I said quietly. "Cole, now." After he left, I sat staring at the structural plans on my desk. Steel beams and concrete foundations, load-bearing walls and stress points. Everything calculated to support the weight it would carry. No guesswork, no hoping for the best. Either the math worked or the building fell down. I thought about the phone calls Mike mentioned, the story changing with each retelling. By now, I was probably the villain in a dozen different versions of events. The unstable husband who couldn't handle his successful wife's career. The controlling man who threw a tantrum when she tried to assert her independence. It didn't matter. I knew what had really happened, and more importantly, I knew what was still happening. The vendors I'd called were already pulling their support for Elin's business. Without my financial backing, she couldn't maintain the credit lines and payment terms that made her freelance work profitable. That evening, I went apartment hunting. I'd found 3 possibilities online, all within my budget if I was living alone. The first was a studio in the village, too small. The second was a 1-bedroom in Brooklyn, too far from work. The third was a 1-bedroom on the Upper West Side, older building but well-maintained, with a view of the Hudson River. "How soon could I move in?" I asked the landlord. "First of the month, if you can provide references and a security deposit." "Done." I wrote him a check on the spot. First month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. 3 months of my old life, paid for with money I'd been saving for a vacation to Italy with a woman who considered me temporary. When I got home, Elin was waiting in the lobby. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, old jeans, a Columbia sweatshirt I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. She'd been crying. "We need to talk," she said. "I don't think we do." "Cole, please, 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded toward the elevator. We rode up in silence. In the apartment, she sat on the couch while I remained standing, keeping the coffee table between us. "I've been staying at Tasha's," she said, "waiting for you to call me back." "I got your messages." "Then why didn't you respond?" "What was I supposed to say, Elin? Thank you for publicly humiliating me? Sorry I didn't laugh along when you told a room full of people that I was disposable?" She flinched. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I was nervous, okay? Richard and James are potential investors for the business Tasha and I want to start. I was trying to seem available for opportunities." "Available?" "Professionally available, open to new ventures, new partnerships, not tied down by..." She gestured vaguely. "By your husband. By conventional expectations. Cole, this could be huge for us, for our future." I almost laughed. Our future? You mean the future where I'm temporary? I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did, and you know what? You were right. I was temporary. But so were you? She looked confused. What do you mean? Peterson Equipment called you yesterday, didn't they? And Meridian Catering? And Urban Event Spaces? Her face went pale. What did you do? I withdrew my financial guarantees, all of them, effective 30 days from notice, as specified in the contracts. You can't do that. I have events scheduled, commitments to clients. You should have thought of that before you decided I was temporary. Elin stood up, her hands shaking. Cole, you don't understand. Without those credit lines, I can't operate. The Saturday event alone requires $15,000 in equipment and catering deposits. Then you'd better figure out alternative financing. I don't qualify on my own. You know that. My income history isn't consistent enough. Maybe you should have considered that before throwing me under the bus for a few laughs. She started pacing, her voice rising. This is insane. You're destroying my career over a stupid comment I made when I was drinking. I'm protecting my financial interests. That's what you'd call it if the situation were reversed. Please? She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to everyone who was there. I'll tell them I was wrong, that I was drunk and stupid and didn't mean it. It's too late for that. It's not too late. We can fix this. I love you, Cole. I know I screwed up, but I love you. For a moment, I almost believed her, almost let myself get pulled back into the orbit of her desperation. But then I remembered the laughter at that table, the way she'd basked in it, the way she'd looked at me like I was a prop in her performance. No, I said. You don't. I do. I swear I do. You love the idea of me, the stability I represent, the financial security, the respectability, but you don't love me. If you did, you never could have said what you said. She was crying now, real tears that smeared what little makeup she was wearing. Cole, please, don't do this. Don't throw away 3 years of marriage. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just accepting what you already decided, that we're temporary. I walked to the bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet, started packing clothes, toiletries, the few personal items that actually mattered to me. Where are you going? She asked from the doorway. I found a new apartment. I'll be out by Sunday. What about us? What about our marriage? I zipped up the suitcase and looked at her. Temporary just ended. Moving out took less time than I'd expected. 3 years of marriage, and most of what I considered mine fit into 6 boxes and 2 suitcases. Books, clothes, a few pieces of furniture I'd brought from my bachelor apartment, some kitchen items Elin had never used anyway. The rest belonged to the life we'd built together, or the life she'd built around me. My new apartment was smaller, but felt more spacious somehow. No expensive furniture that I couldn't put my feet on, no art chosen for its investment potential, rather than because anyone actually liked it. Just clean lines, natural light, and the sound of the Hudson River 12 floors below. I spent Sunday setting up my new place and Monday morning changing my address with the bank, the post office, my employer. Administrative tasks that felt like shedding skin. Tuesday afternoon, Tasha Morrison showed up at my office. Unlike Mike's uncomfortable visit, Tasha arrived with the confidence of someone who was used to getting her way. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent and carried herself like she owned whatever room she walked into. We need to talk, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. I'm busy, Tasha. This won't take long. She crossed her legs and fixed me with the kind of stare she probably used to intimidate vendors and negotiate contracts. You're being vindictive, and it needs to stop. I set down my pen and looked at her. Vindictive how? Don't play dumb, Cole. You know exactly what you're doing, pulling your guarantees, sabotaging Elin's business. It's petty and cruel. It's practical. I'm no longer married to Elin, so I'm no longer responsible for her business debts. Pretty standard stuff. You're still married to her. You walked out over a stupid comment she made when she was drinking. The stupid comment was just the final piece of evidence. The marriage was over long before that dinner. Tasha leaned forward. Look, I know Elin can be dramatic sometimes. She says things for effect, especially when she's trying to impress potential investors, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Actually, it does mean exactly that. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Tell me something, Tasha. How long have you and Elin been planning this business venture? About 6 months. Why? 6 months. And in all that time, discussing funding and investors and business plans, did my name ever come up? As a potential partner, or even just as someone who should be consulted about major decisions that would affect both our lives? Tasha was quiet for a moment. You don't have experience in event planning. I have experience in business. I manage multi-million-dollar construction projects. I understand budgets and timelines and client management, but more importantly, I'm her husband, or was. Cole, the answer is no, isn't it? I was never part of the conversation. I was just the guy with good credit who could co-sign the loans. Tasha's expression shifted slightly. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you what's fair. Fair is me protecting my financial interests when it becomes clear that my wife sees me as a temporary convenience. Fair is me not subsidizing a business venture I was never invited to participate in. You're going to destroy her. I'm going to let her succeed or fail on her own merits, the way she apparently wanted all along. Tasha stood up, her composure cracking slightly. You know what? Maybe she was right about you. Maybe you are just a small-minded, petty little man who can't handle being with a woman who has ambition. Maybe, but I'm a small-minded, petty little man who pays his bills on time and keeps his word. That used to count for something. After she left, I went back to my work. I was designing a parking garage, which felt appropriately mundane given the circumstances. Concrete and steel, drainage and traffic flow. Problems that could be solved with math and engineering rather than psychology and guesswork. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Cole Merrick. Mr. Merrick, this is James Morrison from Morrison Ventures. We met briefly at Ellen's birthday dinner. I remembered him, one of the potential investors Tasha had mentioned. What can I do for you, Mr. Morrison? I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's a business proposition I'd like to discuss with you. I'm not interested in investing in Elin's event planning business. Actually, it's not about that. It's about you. We met Thursday morning at a Starbucks near my office. Morrison looked like every other venture capitalist I'd ever met. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've been asking around about you, he said after we'd gotten our coffee. Impressive resume. Henderson and Associates has a solid reputation, and your projects have all come in on time and under budget. Thank you. I'm putting together a development group. High-end residential properties, mixed-use commercial spaces. We need someone who understands both the construction and design sides of the business. There are plenty of qualified architects in the city. True, but not many who also understand the financial side, who know how to manage budgets and timelines and client expectations, who have a track record of delivering what they promise. I sipped my coffee and waited for the catch. The position would require some travel, Morrison continued. Projects in Boston, Philadelphia, maybe some international work down the line. The compensation would be substantial. How substantial? He named a figure that was nearly double my current salary. What's the catch? I asked. Morrison smiled. No catch. Just good business. I like working with people who honor their commitments, who don't change the terms of agreements when it's convenient for them. I understood. This wasn't really about my qualifications, though I was sure those mattered. This was about demonstrating that actions have consequences, that people who break their word, professionally or personally, lose access to opportunities. When would you need an answer? Take your time. The position will be available when you're ready for it. We shook hands, and he left me sitting in the Starbucks with a job offer that would change my life. Not because of the money, though that was significant, but because of what it represented. A future that didn't depend on being someone's temporary placeholder. That evening, I called my lawyer and filed for divorce. The divorce papers were served on Friday afternoon. I know because Elin called me 17 times between 3 and 6 p.m., her voicemails growing progressively more hysterical with each message. I didn't answer, but I listened to them all. The first few were angry. How dare I file without talking to her first? How could I be so cold and calculating? The middle ones were pleading. We could work this out, go to counseling, find a way forward together. The last few were desperate. She was sorry, she'd made a mistake, she'd do anything to fix this. I deleted them all and went to dinner at a small Italian place near my new apartment, alone, which felt appropriate. Saturday morning, she showed up at my building. The doorman called up to announce her, and I almost told him to send her away. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what her next move would be. She looked even worse than she had the week before. Her eyes were red and swollen, her skin pale and blotchy. She wore the same jeans and sweatshirt from our last conversation, like she'd been sleeping in them. The event tomorrow is canceled, she said without preamble. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. You planned this. You knew exactly what would happen when you pulled those guarantees. I knew what could happen. I didn't know what would happen. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Don't give me that. You're smarter than that, Cole. You calculated every move. She wasn't wrong. I had calculated it, the same way I calculated load-bearing requirements and stress tolerances in my building designs. I'd run the numbers and predicted the failure points. The client is threatening to sue, she continued. They paid a $50,000 deposit for an event I can't deliver. Tasha and I are both liable. You should talk to a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford anything. My credit cards are maxed out, my business is over, and my husband just filed for divorce. She sat down on my couch without being invited, like she was too exhausted to maintain social pretenses. I talked to your friend Mike, she said. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown, that the stress of work and marriage got to you and you're not thinking clearly. What do you think? I think you're the most clear-headed you've ever been, and that scares me. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear the sounds of Saturday morning in Manhattan, traffic, construction, people living their lives. I never meant for it to go this far, she said finally. The comment at dinner, I mean. I was trying to impress James and Richard. I thought if I seemed available for opportunities, they'd take the business proposal more seriously. Available for opportunities. Not romantically, professionally, like I wasn't tied down by conventional expectations. You mean like I wasn't tied down by a husband who expected basic respect. She flinched. I know how it sounded. But it wasn't about you, not really. It was about positioning myself for success. By positioning me as disposable. By positioning myself as flexible. I stood up and walked to the window. The Hudson River stretched out below, gray and endless under the October sky. Do you remember when we first met? I asked. Of course. You were complaining about your job, how your boss didn't appreciate your ideas, how you were stuck in a company that didn't value creativity. You said you wanted to find someone who would support your dreams. You did support them. I supported them financially. I co-signed your loans, guaranteed your contracts, subsidized your freelance work when clients paid late. But I was never part of the dreams themselves. I was just the infrastructure that made them possible. She was crying again, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I didn't see it that way, she said. Yes, you did. And you know what? That might have been okay if you'd been honest about it. If you'd said, Cole, I need you to be my financial partner while I build my career, and in exchange, you'll get to be married to someone successful and well-connected. That's not what I wanted, isn't it? Think about it, Elin. Really think about it. When was the last time you asked me about my work, my goals, my dreams? When was the last time you introduced me as your partner instead of just your husband? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. Neither do I. Because it's been so long that we both forgot it was supposed to happen. She stood up, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. So that's it? 3 years of marriage, and you're just walking away. I'm walking away from 3 years of being taken for granted. There's a difference. What am I supposed to do now? My business is ruined, my credit is destroyed, my marriage is over. I have nothing left. You have the same thing you had before you met me. Your talent, your ambition, your connections. The difference is now you'll have to build on those instead of using someone else's foundation. She moved toward the door, then stopped. I did love you, you know. Maybe not the way you wanted, but I did love you. I know, and I loved you too. But love without respect isn't enough, and respect without honesty isn't real. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly, but the absence of constant low-level anxiety. The feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be. Sunday morning, I called James Morrison and accepted his job offer. Monday morning, I walked into Henderson & Associates and gave my 2 weeks' notice. I'm sorry to lose you, Mr. Henderson said, but I understand. Sometimes you have to tear down the old structure before you can build something better. He was right. Sometimes you did. 2 weeks later, I started my new job. Better salary, better opportunities, better future. I moved to a larger apartment with a view of Central Park. I bought new furniture, pieces I actually liked rather than pieces someone else had chosen for their investment potential. I heard through mutual friends that Elin had moved back in with her parents, that she'd taken a job at a corporate event planning firm, starting over at an entry-level position, that she was seeing a therapist and trying to rebuild her life. I hoped she'd succeed, not because I wanted to get back together. That ship had sailed the moment she called me temporary, but because everyone deserved a chance to learn from their mistakes. As for me, I was no longer temporary. I was permanent, stable, built to last, and I was building my life on a foundation that belonged entirely to me. 6 months later, Mike Sullivan called to apologize. He'd heard about my new job, my new life, and he wanted to make amends for not supporting me when I needed it. I should have listened, he said. I should have trusted that you knew what you were doing. It's okay, Mike. You were trying to keep the peace, I understand. Jennifer feels terrible about it. She wants to have you over for dinner sometime, if you're interested. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. But I probably wouldn't. Some bridges once burned weren't worth rebuilding. Some relationships once broken were better left that way. I'd learned something important from my marriage to Elin Rydell. The difference between being needed and being valued. Between being useful and being respected. Between being temporary and being permanent. And I'd learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to walk away before the structure collapses and hurts everyone involved. Temporary had ended, permanent had begun, and it felt exactly right.